She had an epidural. My first son, Caleb, came out in slow motion fashion. And there he was, and I held it in my hands for the very first time, my first son. I couldn't believe it. Absolutely awesome. 2 years later, back in the same emergency room, different doctor, same doctor group, same situation. My wife is pregnant. The head is coming out, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm thinking, what in the world is this thing? It was huge. The head came out, the arms came out, the doctor grabbed the arms, handed them to me and said, here, pull them out. And I pulled out my second son out of my wife's womb, and I laid him on top, and I cut the cord. The most incredible experience of my life. I became a parent. And it affected me so much that my whole goal in life, outside of being an effective communicator in youth ministry, is to be an effective parent. And so I want to share with you 3 things that you can do today to be a more effective parent in your life. The first thing is that you need to spend time with your children. Deuteronomy 6 talks about spending time with your children when you're walking down the road, when you lie down, when you get up, when your shoes are on, when they're off, when you're in the shower, your living room, sleeping bags, and Deuteronomy 6 covers everything, spending time, but it also encompasses the idea there of spending godly time with your parents, and with your children, having them spend time with their parents. There's a real myth out there right now about, and dads in particular, about dads spending quality time versus quantity time. The myth says that if I spend quality time with my kid, I don't have to spend quantity time with them. And that's wrong. The reverse of that is absolutely true. If you spend quality time with your child, that's a result, an accident actually, that happens from quantity time. So it's an important thing to remember. Time to spend with your kids is important, especially when they're younger. The second thing that you can do to be a more effective parent is to be touched by God Himself. It's amazing what God can do in our own lives if we just ask Him to do it. And so I'm challenging you for the second point here, time with God, to ask God to touch your life, to affect you so that you will be in turn affecting or infecting your children for Christ, because they're going to follow your lead. I don't know if you know this, but little children look up to their parents as superheroes. And as some of us people in youth ministry already understand, that by the time they get into their adolescent years, they look at their parents through critical eyes. And so, who my superheroes are now all of a sudden becoming not my heroes anymore. They're becoming more of I see flaws in me. The third thing that you can do to become a more effective parent is to have toughness in your heart in the area of fear and failure. And what I mean by that is you need toughness in your heart as you confront the area of fear and the area of failure in your heart. The way you respond to fear and the way you respond to failure, your kids are going to respond. And if you can train yourself to respond in a godly way to those 2 things, your children are going to pick up on that and follow that and walk in your footsteps. So I want to challenge you with this question right now. What kind of a legacy will you be leaving with your children? Will you spend time with your children and reproduce yourself into them? Will you ask God to touch you so that you can in turn touch your children? And the third thing is, will you have toughness in your heart in the area of fear and failure to be an example of your children? Thank you.
Chris isn't even married, and he's over here taking all these notes about that.
Well, the information comes from the Family Life Conference, and you can get a much better view of it there.
That's good stuff.
I shouldn't be apologizing for you, but so you'll know that.
Okay, ready?
All right.
You're on, Dave.
Are you ready? Here it is. Every high school student should bring a friend to youth group because of 2 benefits. Every high school student, and this is true in your youth group, should bring a friend to youth group because of 2 benefits. When I was in high school, I was in a Christian rock band, and we were playing around the 5-state area. We were getting airplay on several radio stations. I had hair halfway down my back. I was one of those heavy metal punk rockers from, from the 80s. And we had a guy in the band, his name was George. George was a Filipino guy, good friend. We'd been playing in this band together for about 4 years. One day, George decided he was going to go up to Wisconsin and drink with one of his buddies. And on the way home, he was hit on his side of the car and killed in a car accident. I'll never forget the day. I was at Trinity College at the time, and Dire Straits was playing on the radio. Brothers in Arms just came out on CD, and it was raining. And my friend Howie came into my dorm room and said, Dave, wake up. George's dad just called me, and he died in a car accident last night. I said, yeah, right. I didn't believe him. I didn't believe him. You see, about 3 weeks before that, George came up to me and put his arm around my shoulder and said, hey, Dave, I'm in a Christian rock band, and I don't have to be a Christian, right? I said, yeah, right, George. All the time thinking inside I was going to share my faith with him. And you know, I never got to do it. And there's a George in every youth group in this country, in this world, there's a George. So that brings us to the first benefit. If I had taken George to our high school group, he would have heard the gospel message and he might have gotten saved before he died. So the first benefit is that it creates an opportunity for evangelism. If there's a George in your youth group, your students need to know that he needs to come out and be witnessed to. And that can happen in the course or the context of a youth group. You know, I have a son, he's 2 years old, and his name is Caleb, and I love him with all my heart. He's just such a cool little kid, little football player. He's 2 years old and he says, kick butt. He just said it to me on the phone. I don't know where he learned it. It wasn't from me, I tell you. This winter, he woke up. He went to bed and it was green outside. The sun was shining. He wakes up the next morning and there's 3 inches of snow on the ground. And the look on his face, wow. He couldn't believe the snow was on the ground. It's the first time he ever remembered seeing snow. He was excited by a new experience that he experienced in his young little life. Snow, something he never experienced before. Which brings me to benefit number 2, is that it creates excitement. When students bring their friends to youth group, just like when Caleb looked outside, he was excited. That look on his face. Wow, look at that, he says. You know, beauty. He says, pretty, is what he said. Your high school students, when they bring their friends to youth group, if they can learn by bringing them to youth group to evangelize to their friends, that process of evangelism, and their friends accept Christ, they're going to have that same kind of excitement. And once they get over the scariness of evangelizing to their friends, there's going to be excitement. There's a girl in our youth group right now, her name is Robin. And she called me on the phone one day and said, Dave, I have a friend named Emily. She called me on the phone one day and she wanted to know how to become a Christian. So I was wondering if you would call her back and lead her to Christ for me. And I said, no, absolutely not. You do it. Well, how do I do that? She said. I said, well, how did you become a Christian, Robin? And she said, I confessed my sins to Jesus. I prayed and asked Christ to come into my heart. I said, well, then tell her that. She did that the first time, and she led 2 friends to Christ after that. She was excited. She got over that fear. So every student should bring a friend to youth group because of these 2 benefits. It creates an opportunity for evangelism, and it creates excitement. Don't let there be a George in your youth group. What's that?
Okay, Dave.
Okay, we're ready. About 2 years ago, I bought some beautiful flowers for my wife, a bouquet, 12, almost said 12 dozen, 12 roses. And I sent them to her with 2 Phantom of the Opera tickets, get that, 2. And I sent $20 worth of Baker's Square gift certificates, all right, for absolutely no reason at all. Now I can just hear all you ladies going, inside, and Teddy saying, I don't think so. Well, anyway,
I can't do that.
I sent these flowers to my wife so that she would receive them at work among all of her friends, because I wanted to make a big deal out of her in front of her friends. She received these flowers, and the card said, just because I love you. No other reason. It wasn't our anniversary. It wasn't any hot date. I wasn't trying to make up with her like all her friends thought. She received those at work, and her friends did that. They went, oh, especially when they found out that it was because there was no reason at all. So her friend that she works with called up her husband and proceeded to yell at him because he had not done the same thing for her. Well, marriage relationships can tend to get a little stale at times. When this happens, every couple can renew the relationship by getting back to 3 basics. Basic number 1 is romance. Now, when we're talking about romance, we are talking about the little things that happen. We're not talking about the big flowers that you send or that kind of thing. It could refer to that. But what I'm talking about, if you want to get back to the basic of romance, think back to when you were in high school. When you were in high school, you did all kinds of things. One of the things I did in high school was I cut out this picture, I ripped out this picture from a magazine that was a salad, and it had tomatoes in it. And I found all these pictures of me from 3rd grade, and I cut my head out of all these pictures and stuck them on these tomatoes. And I sent it to her in a letter, just a little love letter that I sent to her. Little things. For you men who are married, take a towel, throw it in the dryer, let it heat up for 15 or 20 minutes, and when your wife is getting out of the shower, hand it to her. Wrap her up in a hot towel. Take her lipstick and write on the mirror. We're talking about little things that our wives would think are romantic. So, get back to romance. That's the first basic. The second basic is humor. Having a good sense of humor is very important. My wife likes it because I'm goofy. Some women, I can appreciate the fact they don't like it when you're goofy. My wife likes it when I'm goofy. One time at Christmas, she wanted diamond earrings for Christmas. So I went out and I bought some cubic zirconia, like a real man, for $3. And I gave her these things, and she looked at them, and she went, oh, and she started trembling because she thought, they were beautiful, and my heart was breaking. So I took these cubic zirconias back from her, and I looked at them, and I said, aren't these things beautiful? And she said, yes. And I threw them over my shoulder, and I said, well, that's not what I'm giving you because they're fake. And I handed her a leather jacket and said, this is your real present. And we still laugh about that to this day. Get back to humor. Basic number 3 is passion. And I'm not talking about this kind of passion. That kind of passion I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the kind of passion that you're passionate about, the thing you think about most. Whatever it is you think about is what you're passionate about. If you think about your ministry, I spend a lot of time thinking about your ministry. You're passionate about your ministry. If you spend a lot of time thinking about God, you're passionate about God. I'm suggesting you should spend a lot of time thinking about your spouse. Be passionate about your spouse. You can be passionate about more than one thing. So get back to passion. Think about your wife. If your marriage is a little stale, get back to passion. Get back to humor. Get back to romance so that your marriage can be sparked up and your relationship can get back to the renewed thing that I talked about at the beginning.
Great conclusion.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have a friend, true story by the way, his name is Steve, and he knows a guy who went to a church. They decided to build a new baptistry in their church. And the unique thing about this baptistry is that it had a glass panel from the top all the way down to the bottom so that you could actually see people being baptized in the water and coming out. Really neat idea. I was really excited about it when I first heard about it. They had their first baptismal service, and they baptized a few people. And the next lady to be baptized was a woman who weighed close to 400 pounds. And she was very concerned about the way she would look in front of the whole congregation. So they practiced this several times previously. It went really well. They baptized her. The deacon and the pastor had to do it together because the pastor just wasn't quite strong enough by himself to do that, quite frankly. So the pastor was already in the water, and the deacon helped the lady step down into the water. And they assumed their positions. The deacon was here, the woman was here, and the pastor was here, facing the audience. A really beautiful situation. So he reaches up and she gives her testimony. He grabs her nose and he says, I baptize you in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. She grabs onto his wrist. He lays her down into the water. She gets right about here. And she rolls back on her heels and they slip out from under her. She slides down into the water, not knowing what to do. She grabs for the first thing she sees, which was the deacon. She grabbed onto the deacon, who is now under the water, going like this, trying to get out of the water. In sheer desperation, she reaches up. She grabs the curtain, because it's the only thing that's there, trying to pull herself out with everything she has, pulls the curtain down into the water with her. Standing behind the curtain was the man they just baptized, completely naked, going... He doesn't know what to do, so he jumps in the water thinking, this is going to help me be protected. He looks out and sees Mrs. Jones in the first row looking right at him. Now he's fighting in the water with the curtain, trying to get it wrapped around him. You know, we all have situations that we want to cover up in our lives. There are things in our lives we want to cover up. God built us with the need to be fully known. Isn't it ironic that we try to cover that up? Covering up leads to aloneness. The greatest need that God made in us is the need for intimacy. We need intimacy in our lives. Being alone is the greatest pain that we can feel in our lives. God made us with that need. There are 3 masks which we wear, and if we remove them, we'll develop intimacy in our relationships. We can fight this isolation, this aloneness, by taking off these 3 masks. The first mask is the happy mask. And the happy mask says, you can't hurt me if you love me. You can't hurt me if you love me. That's the happy mask. I wear the happy mask, and anybody in our church will tell you that I wear the happy mask. One time we were preparing our missionaries to go out to Venezuela, and somebody came up with a really neat fundraiser. They built an airplane out of foam board. And this airplane was about this big, and it had the wings, and it all came apart. And the idea was you could buy a wing, you could buy the fuselage, you could buy the tail, you could buy anything you wanted. And that way you put it all together, and then once the airplane was all together, they'd be ready to go. They'd be all fully funded and ready to go. So they asked me to help demonstrate this on the stage. They just wanted me to bring the airplane out to them on the stage. So they're up there talking about how the airplane worked and everything. It was all put together so people could see the final product. Well, I thought, I'm going to be creative. You know, McNair talks about being very creative, and I'm going to try and be creative. What I didn't realize at the time is my creativity was trying to gain acceptance from our crowd, from our people in our church, about 300 of them. I take the airplane and I go, and then in front of the whole church, I trip over the cord that goes to the monitor, completely breaking it. I'm laying on my face, the crowd is laughing, and I'm thinking, what an idiot. I couldn't believe I did it. That's the happy mask. Some of you wear the happy mask. And if you're wearing the happy mask, I challenge you to take that happy mask off of your face and be transparent so that you can begin to develop intimacy. The second mask is the indifference mask. And the indifference mask says this: you can't hurt me if I don't need you. Now I'm going to go home tomorrow, and my son Kyle is going to avoid me for the first hour when I get home. And it's because I left him. I caused him pain. We had intimacy before I left. A lot of intimacy. And I left him, and it caused pain. So he's going to put this mask on called indifference. He's going to say to me with his attitude, Dad, I don't need you. After about an hour, he's going to take that mask off, and we're going to be intimate with each other, and it's all going to be okay. But what he's saying is, I can't stand to be hurt. So if I don't need you, I don't have to be hurt. That's the indifference mask. And I challenge you to peel the indifference mask off of your face so that you can develop intimacy with another person. The third mask is the angry mask. And the angry mask says this: you can't hurt me if I'm better than you. Now you see that with kids in the locker room. You know, guys in the locker room pushing each other up against the lockers. Hey man, my muscles are bigger than you. I work out every day. I'm better than you are. The angry mask says, I am better than you, so you can't hurt me. Girls do that. Well, I am prettier than she is. I'm the prettiest girl in the school. That's what they do. That's the anger mask that causes intimacy to not happen in their relationships. So if you're wearing the angry mask, I challenge you to rip that angry mask off of your face so that you can develop intimacy with another person and be transparent. These masks impede relationships and leave us in isolation. The mark of feeling safe in relationships is transparency. If you want to feel safe in a relationship that you have with somebody else, you have to be transparent. You have to take the masks off of your face and let people see you exposed for who you really are. And when you do that, you will begin to achieve intimacy with them.